Hello, everybody, and welcome to I Am Here. I'm your coach, Felicia Kerr, and this is my podcast, SOS, A Call to Healing. And today we are going to discuss my battle with forgiveness. Now, if you haven't done so already, go and listen to my previous podcast where I spoke about not understanding what it meant to forgive yourself. So now today I'm actually going to discuss, to the best of my ability, in somewhat detail, of my battle with forgiveness. It hasn't been easy. I'll tell you that. And forgiveness as a topic is such a mammoth topic. And, my battle truly started from what I experienced. So basically, just to give a little bit of background, I was married for 7 years. Now, even though I'm going to discuss about forgiveness, it's not just going to be focused on my marriage to my ex-husband, but generally how I saw forgiveness and how it was a hindrance to healing and eventually letting go. So I was married for 7 years, and within that 7 years, I produced 3 beautiful daughters. But as I mentioned in my other podcast, it didn't occur to me that it was a narcissistic marriage. At the time, I didn't know what narcissism was. I later found out what it meant, and it was a sad realization that is what I lived through. So, being in that very complex situation, like I mentioned before, I was filled with a lot of confusion, a lot of anger. It was just a very terrible time when it came to me mentally, spiritually, physically being healthy. I wasn't any of those things. I wasn't in the category of being healthy at all. I was very much unhealthy on every level. So when the marriage finally came to an end, honestly, as we go through the podcast in terms of my journey to healing, there's so many topics we're going to touch on, and hopefully everything would start to fit together as a jigsaw puzzle. But I found myself filled with anger. I challenged the concept of forgiveness because everybody had their take on it. And what I realized with those who I consulted about forgiveness, they were addressing forgiveness from a very mature, spiritually mature stance. And I hadn't reached that yet. I felt I had to hold on to my pain. I needed my pain. What I needed it for, I don't know. I can't tell you. But I wanted to hold on to that pain. It was a very toxic setting that I was in. And when I started to join the fellowship, one thing I realized was I wanted to heal. And I was open to healing, but I didn't quite understand what the process entailed, and the process involved forgiveness. And when I was challenged on several occasions about what forgiveness meant, this is where my battle began. And I used to think, the stance people used to take was, you have to learn to forgive, you have to learn to let go. He doesn't know what he's doing. And that used to fill me with a lot of frustration. How could this person not know what he was doing? Because during the very dark moments of our marriage before we separated officially, I felt that, and feelings can be somewhat fleeting. I knew that my ex-husband had changed. The person that I thought I was married to no longer existed. It was questionable whether he existed at all, but it was a new person that was just driven by something quite dark to bring pain, confusion, hurt, chaos, and destruction. And I was just told at the time, it seemed quite flippant to me, even though I was surrounding myself with people who were very much healed, who were very much established in their faith, forgive and let go. To a certain degree, that sounded like an insult. I felt there was a lack of understanding what I had been through. And I used to challenge it. So there was a time when I had attended a fellowship. I was, visiting somewhat. And they spoke about forgiveness. And they gave an example of how a woman, I can't remember what faith she was, but a woman who had forgiven somebody who had murdered their child. And apparently they were in the court system, and the mother faced the murderer and told the murderer, "I forgive you." Now, a part of me still, still struggles with that. But at the time, I was completely against the idea, because my idea of forgiveness was the person that caused the offense had to show some type of remorse. They had to tell you they were sorry. If they didn't tell you they were sorry, then there was no need for me to forgive you. Now, a lot of you will probably feel, yeah, that's pretty much right. Why should I forgive somebody who's not sorry? Especially people who've been through a lot of trauma. So that was my stance. Why would I forgive someone who's not sorry for hurting me? If anything, continues to hurt, continues to try and look for a reaction. And the response I used to get from those who were way so much more mature than me, spiritually and emotionally, because when it comes to forgiveness, we're dealing with emotions as well. They would say, learn to forgive. He doesn't know, or they don't know what they are doing. And forgiveness is not necessarily about that individual, but about you as a person. And that stumped me, because I think we all naturally believe that it is about that person, because, whoever the offender is, it's about them causing hurt, causing pain. But it got me pondering, and, as I tend to do, I tend to research and understand what forgiveness was. And even though I did the research, I did the exploring and seeking out, speaking to people, I still had a battle with forgiveness, especially when the person is still committing the crime against you. I was also challenged with the fact of, have I ever done anything that warranted forgiveness from somebody else? And of course, I had. We're not perfect. We all fall short. Nevertheless, when you've been through something traumatic, when you've been through abuse, when your trust has been misused and just violated in every aspect, from having affairs to you name it, it becomes pretty hard to kind of think about, what you've done, and you kind of just focus on the person that continues to cause the pain. Now, what I found quite difficult was when I was asked on my journey to healing, still very much in a vulnerable place, to pray for the person. Now that was just something that blew my mind. And I'm going to do a podcast on prayer. And I remember one lovely person said to me when I was just in this middle of crying and pouring out my heart, and my tears were just flowing. And they were like, "Do you pray at all?" And that's actually the name of my next podcast. Well, maybe not after this one, but the question was, do you pray at all? So imagine being told, pray for this person. It was literally like somebody was telling me, get over it. But how wrong I was. So the battle still continues. I'm going to be honest with you guys, because I have reached a certain stage of forgiveness. Now I'm going to go through how I done that. But the battle still continues, because there's something that happens, and that is when someone has gone through pain. I would say the hardest part of forgiveness is the scars that are left after that deep wound or that deep cut. It's the scars. Now we're going to discuss what to do with those scars. How do we dress it up? How do we stop looking back over our shoulders of the past? How do we prevent ourselves from looking back and looking at the past? And, forgiveness is not just about my ex-husband. In that time of going through something so traumatic, because it was also a very spiritual thing I went through, I was introduced just along the journey, not that somebody physically came and introduced me to these individuals, but I met people along the way who were absolutely lovely. And, they had wonderful intentions of her, trying to help me through my journey. I was a mother of 3 children. My youngest was literally a baby at the time. And I'm saying baby, I'm talking a couple of months old. And in that moment, you can only imagine how vulnerable I was. A few of them took advantage of my vulnerability. And once that was kind of discovered in how they would approach me, the things they would say, there was a lot of manipulation going on. I started to feel resentment. And that led to understanding that there could be an issue of forgiveness here. Now, when it comes to forgiveness, the key is, for me, was to understand how to let go. I couldn't let go. Like I mentioned before, I felt like I needed my pain. What for? I'm not sure. Maybe there's something I need to deeply explore. But when I think about it now, why did I need that pain? So, as much as I thought I needed that pain, maybe to hold that person at ransom, I don't know. Deep down inside, I desperately wanted to move on, and I didn't know how. And like I mentioned before, the hardest part of forgiveness is the scars. So how do we get to that place of healing where we get the right nutrients, the right essential oils for those scars, that they will fade away in time to the point it feels like it never existed? Easier said than done, hey? So the steps I took to letting go, and let me tell you now, I still have a real bout with forgiveness, but I've reached a point that I understand it now and I execute it in my daily life. But it doesn't mean I don't have moments of flashback where I remember certain things and it kind of flares up that scar, that wound again. When I went through the very chaotic time with my ex-husband until we officially divorced in 2020, just before the pandemic, I realized I had to allow myself to grieve. Divorce, I understand when the scripture says, and I'll put it up, that divorce is a violent thing. It did feel violent. It did feel hard. As much as the marriage was unhealthy and it was toxic, I didn't believe in divorce. I'm very much a believer in the institution of marriage. So I had to allow myself to grieve over the relationship that had failed, over the person that I thought I once loved. or did love at one point, and I had to grieve and accept some raw emotions that I was going through. At the same time, I had to seek out support. I wouldn't be where I am today with the qualification of being a coach, of being a counselor, of being where I am today, being able to share my story prayerfully, hoping that it will help somebody, if it wasn't for the support that surrounded me, which was, I personally believe, was divinely sent. It's important to have those people around you. Whoever those people are, they will gravitate around you. They are destiny builders, I call them. They are the progress in your journey to healing. And I was so fortunate to be able to seek out the right support to speak life into my situation. And at the same time, I did cross paths with people that did seem like they were filled with light, but there was a bit of darkness there. And when I say darkness, I mean there are people who also carry trauma and pain and probably did not realize what they were going through, and also, rightly so, needed the help and probably wasn't in the place to help other people, especially myself. One of the other things that I realized I had to learn from was my mistakes and own the mistakes I made. I didn't, and I'll keep saying this, and everybody always says, Felicia, the things that you went through, you were just reacting. Narcissist does A, B, and C. I get it. But I am one for owning my mistakes. Why? Because I make it my priority to learn from my mistakes so I don't repeat them. So I had to learn from the past mistakes, i.e., there was a lot of red flags that I saw before I married my husband, but I took no notion or paid much attention to it based on the fact that probably a little bit naive, and I wanted to be married. I loved the idea of being married, being a wife. I didn't want to be a girlfriend. So this individual, gave me the opportunity to be a wife. So I had to learn from past mistakes by not noticing the red flags, not understanding what those flags were, and actually learning how to pray. And, once again, we go back to that keyword prayer, which I didn't do much of in the beginning of my journey or even during my life, until I later learned that I didn't know how to pray at all. The hardest part for me was to cut contact. Cutting contact was not easy when it came to, now I'm focusing on my ex-husband because obviously we had children together. There was still a huge part of me that allowed a lot of boundaries in my life to be crossed by my ex-husband, even though we were divorced or separated. And I got a lot of telling off for this for people who were my support system in my life. They had to teach me how to create healthy boundaries so it wouldn't be crossed, not just for my own personal well-being, but for the well-being of my children. So I had to learn to cut off contact. And I think the cutting of contact kind of blended in with the grieving process, because it wasn't just a case of cutting off my ex-husband, but it was a case of cutting off those that associated with my ex-husband. So that could be brothers-in-law, sister-in-law, the whole shebang. And that wasn't easy because I'm also someone that believes in family. But I had to come to the realization, and this is also part of the stage of forgiveness, that part of my life was now over. Now, that stage of forgiveness is, I would say, is called denial. There's a part of me, hence why my boundaries were being crossed a lot, where I was literally in denial about certain things. There was a lack of acceptance of what the new norm, so to speak, was divorced, separated, new lives, being a single mother. And what I can say as well, that's, in the stages of forgiveness, I was full of anger. How dare you make me a divorcee? How dare you reject me? There were so many things that came into that. And I'm just telling you my mind state of the time. Obviously, as I continue to journey on, I realize certain things when it comes to rejection and etc., which we'll go into. But I was filled with anger, and that anger led to a temporary depression, which I guess is expected. I felt depressed with where my life was, how things had turned out, and I felt very sad for my children because we were now in a situation that I couldn't relate to, and I worried a lot for my children, not having a male covering in the household. And as time goes on, as I build my podcast, as I build my platform, we will talk about the importance of a spiritual covering and the role of the man in a marriage or in a relationship. So there was a lack of acceptance. I was in serious denial, and I was filled with anger. And this was hindering the process of forgiveness. And I used to bargain a lot with the idea of forgiveness. This is where the whole battle came in. I guess I could forgive him if I knew he was going to, suffer for what he has done. I guess I can forgive him if I just knew he wasn't going to fare well, which is absolutely wrong. That's not what forgiveness is about. And I think that kind of falls into the whole idea of passive forgiveness. And passive forgiveness is something that stresses on being indifferent to the person. So you're not really bothered if they're around or not. It makes no difference. Now, the question is that true forgiveness if you're indifferent to the person? For me, it wasn't, because I think it allowed certain topics or certain issues, not to be addressed fully. So I was now bargaining with the idea of forgiveness. I could forgive that person if A, B, C, and D. That wasn't true forgiveness. Then I realized for myself that forgiveness for me had to be about letting go and moving on. It was very difficult to learn how to put myself first. That was also part of the letting go process, i.e. the forgiveness that will lead to healing. Putting myself first, making goals, making future plans, being intentional. I am going to let go. I am choosing to forgive. I am refusing to look back. These are the thought processes that I had to go under. And I guess we can say it's like the renewing of the mind. The Bible, the scriptures talk about renewing my mind daily. And boy, was that tough. Because the flesh, the skin, the carnality of man, the carnality of me wanted to wallow, wanted to bite back. But I just knew the other side of me wanted to heal. And a part of me was quite afraid of having to go through the process of making these conscious decisions because it hurt. Now, a lot of us don't understand that any process, when it comes to forgiveness, when it comes to healing, hurts. So as much as I wanted to hold on to the pain of what this individual or several individuals had done to me in my vulnerable moment, the pain also stemmed from not wanting to give these people power or authority or be impactful in my life anymore. So when I now started to grow spiritually and challenge this concept of forgiveness, I started to grow a lot of empathy. Once again, it was difficult at times to keep this empathy up, especially when the person is still attacking you. I'm going to just be honest, to this very day, the abuse still continues, but I have evolved in such a way that I pay no attention to it. But at the height of my journey, the people I had around me, they had to really open my eyes and say, for this person to hurt you, they are hurt. We all know the saying, hurt people hurt others. So I was dealing with an individual who was very damaged, and somewhere in his life, whether childhood, whatever the case may be, not just him, but other people during that time, they have been damaged. They have gone through trauma, and all they were doing was reenacting whatever they had been through on other people. And I was told to put myself in their shoes, understand their pain. And when I was reading, I was able to do this when I started reading the scriptures more. Because anytime anybody reads the scriptures with an earnestness, with wanting to just see the truth, you can't help but reflect. You end up reflecting. And this is what happened. I started to reflect. I knew a bit about my husband's situation, and I started to have empathy for what he was going through, how he behaved, not taking away the fact that you still have to be held responsible for your actions, but being able to understand, well, how else is he supposed to act? He's a broken person. So it was tough because there were times where I didn't care what he had been through. I was very defensive over my feelings. But I realized in order to reach that place of being free, and that's the key, is to be free, I had to let go. So by acknowledging his own pain as well, I started to imagine walking in their shoes, what they had been through, especially when I started to remember certain things I was told about his past, etc. And, we went back to that thing of praying for the person that hurt you. I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know where to start. One thing for sure was that I was not going to pray for that person I didn't believe at that time to pray for someone who had done something wrong. Oh, bless them, or make sure they're fine. No, I couldn't subscribe to that. I just didn't know how to, until I was taught how to pray, in the sense of praying that the eyes are open to what they are doing that is causing pain. Because I think a lot of us, because we're all trying to be the best that we can be, physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally. And sometimes I think we say to ourselves, oh, I just prayed the best for them, which kind of diverts that person from taking any... It's like they avoid taking any responsibility for their poor action. And it kind of reminded me of a part in scripture where it says, do not strengthen the arm of the wicked. And all we ask for from anybody, and also from ourselves, is about accountability. So I learned how to pray in the context that that person would understand what they were doing if it was the will of the Most High, and his eyes or their eyes would be open to the errors of their ways, and there will be a transformation, a circumcision of the heart. So when I learned, this is what I was taught. Everyone has their own approach. But when I was taught how to pray in that way, I understood it. And that really helped in my journey to healing and forgiveness. And I just had to acknowledge the pain. Acknowledging the pain for me was like holding a mirror up to my face. Sometimes I didn't want to acknowledge the pain. Sometimes I wanted to feel that the pain didn't exist. But acknowledging the pain helped me, and still helps me, to keep moving and to keep forgiving. And also remembering, most importantly, that I have also been forgiven. And I know I have for certain things I've done, in my past or wherever. But when we pray, or when I have prayed for forgiveness, I know that forgiveness has been bestowed onto me. So who am I to withhold any form of forgiveness to anyone, And I still battle with the concept of forgiveness, depending on the extremity of the abuse or whatever, I still challenge that. And I'm not coming here as a coach to talk on this matter from a professional stance. I don't think I can do that because everybody's situation is different. All I can do is express how I got to a place of forgiveness where I understood it, where it was no longer a battle, where I was not being I wasn't executing passive forgiveness and being very indifferent to the circumstance or the person, whatever the case is. But rather, it was a choice I made. I don't want to be in pain anymore. I don't want to hurt. I don't want this individual to have an impact on the way I think, feel, process, or just live my life. I want to be set free. And how do I go about doing that? And I sort it out. And all praises to our Heavenly Father that He put that support system around me. I cannot stress enough to get the support system around, the right support system around, because there are people who would keep you in your pain, who would tell you what you would like to hear, but it's just shrouded in a lot of untruths. So I hope this podcast helps you. I did discuss a lot of things in terms of stages of forgiveness and the process of letting go, the process I took to let go. And the hardest bit is about the scars. And I think once we kind of go through the processes and think about it, just think through things, think through your situation. I thought through my situation. And I realized as much as there have been scars there, they don't impact my appearance. In fact, they give me character. They've changed me. They've formed me. They're continuing to form me. So think through what you've been through. And if it's requested, like the last time it was requested to make a bullet point presentation, more than happy to make a quick bullet point presentation of the steps I took to letting go, the stages I battled with forgiveness, which I do. And one thing I would say is this: do not feel disheartened if you feel like, my gosh, I cannot get this person out of my head. I can't stop thinking about what this person has done to me. That is all part of the process of forgiveness. I think that will fall under the category of anger. So we're going to have flashbacks. Why we're human beings. But it's now taking those progressive steps and making that conscious choice to say, I'm choosing to let go. And once again, seeking that support system that can help you to do that. So I thank you for listening. And I pray that you join me on my next podcast. And I hope this helps you all. Please share, and subscribe. And I look forward to catching up with you all again soon.